My name is Jon Matonis, and I am one of the founders of the Bitcoin Foundation. I'm also the CEO of Globitex, which is a Bitcoin exchange in Luxembourg. And I put up here my Twitter address, so please follow me on Twitter. It will be the way to keep in touch with what's happening in Bitcoin, and it will be one of the smartest decisions that you make today, hopefully. We are here, let me start because we are having this conference at a very important week, a very timely week for the happenings here on April 8th. And the reason is because this is the week of the Panama Papers. And everyone, I'm sure, here is familiar with the Panama Papers. Well, the crime of the Panama Papers is not that some people wanted financial privacy. The crime of the Panama Papers was that that same level of financial privacy was not available to everyone else. It was only available to the wealthy or the well-connected politicians. And Bitcoin reverses that, and it inverts that paradigm so that the regular people will have the opportunity to have the same level of financial privacy as all those people in the Panama Papers. And let me show you and explain to you how that's going to happen. Bitcoin Bitcoin is the future of money. And one of the reasons it's the future of money is because it is not something that you have, it's something that you know. And that's what money will be in the future. It'll be what you know. And it will also, very, very likely, not be something that's issued from a central bank. And to put that in perspective, we do have to go back to some primitive times, to the stone money of Yap. The reason that this is important to Bitcoin is because it is consensus-based money. The Yap Islands are in the Pacific. And the tribes and the tribal chiefs in Yap, they would use this stone money as a way to record and measure their wealth. So you're looking at consensus money from the past right there. Everyone knew who owned what part of the stones, and they even stopped moving them around after a while. But one of them fell to the bottom of the ocean. And they said, well, you think we should go down and get it? And everybody said, no, we don't need to go get it. I mean, we know whose it is. And everybody in the community agreed on whose it was. Well, Bitcoin is a lot like that because I don't pull a Bitcoin out of my pocket. It exists on the cloud. It exists in the giant public ledger in the sky. And when you're sending it to someone, you're really just moving something that's on the ledger. You're moving your rights to access that to someone else. So consensus-based money with, obviously, some ties to the past. Friedrich von Hayek is an Austrian economist. He won a Nobel Prize. The quote here, that money does not have to be created legal tender by governments. Like law, language, and morals, it can emerge spontaneously. Such private money has often been preferred to government money, but governments usually soon suppressed it. This was from his famous book in 1976 called The Denationalization of Money. So he's already anticipating that we don't need governments and central banks in the state to issue our money. And this was 1976. The coins on the right are they're the first gold coins, and they were from the Kingdom of Lydia in about 550 BC, which is now modern-day Turkey. The reason they're so important and the reason I put them on here is because you can actually pinpoint in history on a timeline when the state appropriated the monetary unit. Because these gold coins were initially made by private goldsmiths. And then the king came along and said, well, this will legitimize my kingdom, and I'm going to put my stamp on them. And he took the private goldsmith coins and started putting the impression of the king on the coins. And from that point forward, we had the state appropriation of money. And Hayek is discussing the possibility of going back to a time when we didn't have the government-issued money. But we don't need kings to coin our money. Bitcoin has already proven that. So if there's any central bankers or wannabe central bankers in the crowd, we don't need your services anymore. And Bitcoin has already proven that. You can already send money from one part of the world to China in very small amounts for near zero fees. So it's happening today. The Bitcoin market cap is near $7 billion. The global node distribution covers almost every country in the world. You can go to websites and see where the global nodes are operating, and these are full connected nodes hosting the Bitcoin blockchain in real time. Okay, what does the SETI project have to do with Bitcoin? Well, in 2013, up until 2013, the SETI project was the world's largest distributed computing project. This is where people donated their cycles, their dormant computer time cycles, to a larger effort to try to discover inbound radio signals from outer space to see if to prove that we might not be alone. Well, at the end of that year, Bitcoin passed this project. So Bitcoin is now the world's largest distributed computing project in the world. And it didn't just pass it by a little bit, it passed it by a wide, wide margin. And part of the result of passing the SETI project was the massive computational power that currently secures the Bitcoin network. You're seeing a chart here from the inception of Bitcoin in 2009. So very easy to mine and secure transactions almost for the first 3 or 4 years. And then we see a very rapid spike and almost a line that's shooting straight up. This is the proof of work, the consensus mechanism, and the computational power behind Bitcoin with all of those mining computers around the world that are working very competitively and feverishly to solve the next, for lack of a better word, to solve the next math puzzle in a 10-minute time increment. And the reason it shot up so much at that time was this is when ASICs came online. And people weren't just mining with their laptops or their game computers. They started to purchase application-specific integrated circuits. And these are specially designed, this is specially designed hardware that only does one thing, mine for Bitcoin, and it does it very, very well. So we're over 1 million gigahashes, or I'm sorry, 1 million terahashes per second, which is 1,000 gigahashes, or 1 exahash. So just like one of the politicians said, I don't even want to know what comes after a quadrillion. We are finding out what's going to come after an exahash. And you can go to Wikipedia and you can see how they're naming these things. But 1 million gigahashes per second in computational power makes this the world's most secure network. So it's stronger and more secure and more resistant than even the central banks, even the commercial banks, and even Visa, MasterCard, American Express for processing. Bitcoin also has a controlled supply. So the issuance of Bitcoin is known. There will only be 21 million Bitcoin. And we're already at the point of 15 million being issued. So it slopes off, the slope gets very flat heading into the year 2140. And before you say, well, we might run out of Bitcoin, 21 million is not even enough for everybody in the state of California. You can subdivide Bitcoin by going inside the decimal space. So you can move up to 8 spaces to the right of the decimal. You can even increase that if you need to 16, 32, further. Now, by comparison, this is a different approach than what the bank in Venezuela or the central bank in Zimbabwe will do, because they put zeros to the other side of the decimal point. This entire theme that really Friedrich von Hayek launched in 1976 is now leading us to a modern separation of money and state. And the reason that this is so important for society and for civilization is it is on the same level as the separation of church and state in terms of how it will change our lives. When the printing press came out, Gutenberg's printing press, that was the beginning of the end for the Vatican's power, because they weren't the only ones who were able to print things anymore, and all they printed was the Bible. So that change was the beginning of the Vatican's decline in power. The ability to create money outside of the realm of the state is going to be the beginning of the decline of the power of central banks. Now, the reason that we're seeing so much investment, the prior speaker talked about a lot of investment going into Bitcoin. This is very true. There's many, many different sectors that are receiving Bitcoin investment. But the main reason that the private equity people and the VCs are so interested in this space is not because it's another PayPal or even another Visa or even another Western Union. The reason that they're seeing it as the big win and the home run in venture capital investing, everybody wants the home run, is because Bitcoin as a protocol will be at the level of TCP/IP. It'll be at the level of SMTP for email, or VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol. As the world's first and largest production environment for a money protocol, Bitcoin is the undisputed leader. So it has the network effect already behind it. And this is how standards and protocols emerge. They're not necessarily the ones that are the best, but they're the ones that are the first, and they're the ones that have experienced the network effect. So it will be very difficult for a challenger to unseat something like a money transfer protocol once it gets embedded and ingrained. You know, we all have to live with TCP/IP now. That might not be the best. The same with SMTP for the email protocol. But these are the ones that emerged as the winners. Okay, I wanted to show you this because when you have a distributed protocol and a distributed network, such as Bitcoin, global distributed network, you get massive resiliency that you wouldn't have gotten before. And the fire that you see on the left is actually a Bitcoin mining facility in Thailand. They had improper cooling conditions, and it blew up. And it damaged and probably ruined a lot of their equipment. At the time of this fire and explosion, this facility represented about 3% of the computational power of the Bitcoin network. 3%. It blew up and went offline. But no transactions were affected. The network continued to go. It routed around the damage, just like Bitcoin routes around regulation as damage. And they continued to process transactions. And if you had lost a major node like this on Visa or on American Express, I mean, it would have cut off a sector of the world for about 2 weeks for them to repair it. So this is what massive, massive resiliency can do for you. And I say it's disruption within disruption because, of course, it's a network, a payment network, but it's also a new monetary unit. Bitcoin is its own monetary unit. So the small b monetary unit runs on the large B, capital B, network. So it's disrupting two things at the same time. This is the part of the presentation where I talk about how Bitcoin has the attributes of paper cash. Now I'm going to stand over here so I can read it better. These are all the things you get with paper cash today. So Bitcoin is not creating any new privacies for you or any new features. It's just letting you hold what you already have with paper cash. So don't ever, ever trust the people that try to take the paper cash away from you, because they're trying to take away these elements of freedom. And with reasonable privacy, immediate settlement, transaction irreversibility, minimum traceability, fungibility, and then the last one is selective disclosure of ownership. It's only up to you, as it should be, on whether or not you reveal to who and to when, and to how much Bitcoin you hold. This is not something that you need permission for. This selective disclosure of ownership is your right as a holder of financial value. So now we're seeing about 200,000 transactions per day on the Bitcoin network, and new wallets are downloaded every day. This is a virtual explosion in Bitcoin adoption, in Bitcoin volume, and it's occurred in a period of only 7 short years. So what are the benefits for consumers? Let's look at some of the benefits. Personal control of your assets with a backup. We've never been able to, you can't back up your gold or silver, but you can back up Bitcoin, and you can do multiple backups. That doesn't mean that you can spend them all, but you can at least have backups in different places. Protection from identity theft, protection from financial surveillance, if that's important to you. Bypass certain payment blockades, like WikiLeaks. Unrestricted cross-border transactions, so it's not just during banking hours. It's 24/7, very low fees, cross-border transactions that you set and determine. I mean, this is what we all thought that it should be like. Fixed supply of 21 million, and then protection from confiscation, because there's no third party involved, there's no intermediary. You're in charge, so your assets can't be confiscated, like they were in Cyprus, when they had the Cyprus deposit levy. I didn't even know there was such a thing as a deposit levy. The Bitcoin market cap, as I mentioned before, is approaching 7 billion now. It's been very stable since late 2013, when the price was over $1,200 per Bitcoin. So we're seeing it stabilize around 7 billion. And what I'm here today to point out, though, most of all, is with the separation of money and state, the power is with us. We don't have to accept legal tender as the only type of money. And legal tender is basically a myth, and Bitcoin destroys that myth. And when a greater number of people start to realize what they can do with that power and what they can do with a monetary unit that's not controlled by the state and by the central bank, is there will be this voluntary movement that increases the power from the bottom up of the people who are using the money and reduces it from the center. So government doesn't care that money is an illusion. I mean, money is based on faith. Whatever type of money it is, it's based on faith. And they don't care that it's an illusion. They only want it to be their illusion. But when you have bottom-up money from the bottom up, then the people can determine what they want to use and what illusion that they want to use for monetary value. So in wrapping this up, I think we're entering a post-legal tender age. And so economics books are going to need to be rewritten, especially the ones that deal with money and economics. Because in a post-legal tender age, the challenges are going to be different. They're going to be a lot different. We're going to have to learn how to thrive in a world without central banking. And I think it's very possible. The commercial banks, as it was mentioned previously, are not really going to be affected that much by Bitcoin as long as they adapt. Because the primary function of a bank is deposit taking and lending. And Bitcoin doesn't change the fact in the world that we need deposit taking institutions and we need loans. And this is banks' primary, it's their primary raison d'etre. It's their original purpose. It wasn't meant, they weren't meant to be enforcement agents for the government or a part of a fractional reserve issuance scheme. They were meant to do deposit taking and lending. And they will always have that role going forward if they adapt. The trend towards monetary decentralization will outlive political institutions. So what do I mean by this? We're already seeing the complete breakdown of monetary regimes in Venezuela, in Argentina. Not so much here, except for Belarus. And Zimbabwe already had the wheels come off. You know, they had so many zeros, they just had to start all over. And Bitcoin will be here. It will stay, even though the political institutions that issued some of the fiat currency have come and gone. So you really have to ask yourself, what would you rather have in the future? Would you rather have a briefcase full of euros or a briefcase full of Bitcoin? And how you answer that question has a lot to say about where you put your faith. Okay, people say Bitcoin is digital gold because it has scarcity and it's actually better than gold because you can move it with very little cost and you can make backups. I think gold is analog Bitcoin, and we're going to start to see a lot of new changes because of the fact that Bitcoin is it's a commodity money. It's the world's first 100% digital asset. XBT is the proposed currency code for Bitcoin at the ISO. So I'm going to give you an investment tip from attending here today. So everyone in this room knows, and not many other people know, but I would say it's a very, very serious buy signal for Bitcoin when the ISO adopts the XBT currency code. It's only pending right now, but many people are already using it. This is the 6 payment services on the left. It's a building in Zurich, and they maintain the ISO currency codes like USD, EUR. Bitcoin is XBT, proposed. Swift is the building on the right, which looks like a temple. And they have an interest in this as well. They want a currency code for Bitcoin because they would be able to deal with it in their systems. And this is why it's a tremendous buy signal. Because if the ISO adopts XBT for Bitcoin, that means that all of the enterprise software systems, all the packages around the world that FX dealers rely on, banking institutions, they will already have XBT and Bitcoin in their data tables by default. So it will unleash a platform, and it will unleash an opportunity for these mainstream financial institutions to start making a market in a digital asset. Now, if you had to pin me down and say, I would say 6 months to 12 months on when XBT is actually approved. And by the way, it's X because that's reserved for non-political currencies that don't have a government issuer. Gold is XAU, silver is XAG. Now these guys are already quoting it in XBT. You can pull these up on your mobile app and you can punch in XBT, and from any of these price services, you can get a quote, real-time quote in Bitcoin. So they're already by default using the XBT currency code, even though it's still pending, which is very, very good for the future, I think, for getting it approved. Okay, I want to break it out into monetary policy impact and fiscal policy impact. Because in a post-legal tender age, without the central bankers to do anything, how is this going to be managed? What are the changes going to be? Now, I've broken them down into a very high level. So on the monetary policy side, I'm saying that there will become a near impossibility for fractional reserve banking because we haven't seen money substitutes yet emerge for Bitcoin. It's very unique in that it can transfer value and also be a store of value. So there's not a great need for money substitutes to emerge. That's not to say that they won't. Healthy deflation. So you have to unlearn all of your Keynesian economics, and you have to start all over, and you have to learn how to not fear deflation, because deflation is not a bad thing. Deflation means it's an efficient allocation of resources. And it means that your purchasing power is going up as a consumer. So you don't have generational deterioration of wealth that goes to the central bank. And we'll see a reduction in detrimental business cycles. So we won't see these booms and busts that you see through the monetary policy operations, but we'll see something that's more healthy, more risk-based on lending, rather than on the manipulations of the policy people affecting the interest rates and steering the interest rates. Okay, I actually think that the changes and the impact are more interesting on the fiscal side, because with Bitcoin, you're fundamentally changing the process of taxation. Taxes don't go away in a Bitcoin world. So don't start thinking, oh, with Bitcoin, we won't have any taxes. We're just going to have different kinds of taxes. So we will most likely shift from taxing income, which is a bad idea anyway, because it ruins incentives, to taxing consumer consumption and consumption at levels, which is more like a VAT. Now, I'm not in favor of a VAT either, but because I'm a libertarian. But a shift from income tax to taxing consumption is easier for the governments to administer. They won't be able to understand let alone prove what an individual's income is. So they will be forced to taxing consumption, because that'll be easier to see when people consume things and apply the enforcement of that to the larger merchants. And also my second one on here is we will have a check on spending. Because when large governments want to conduct wars around the world, I won't say any names here, but if they can't raise the money through taxes, they print it. And they worry about paying it later. You won't be able to do this if you're forced as a government to raise taxes for every adventure you want to go on. So this will definitely have a change on the fiscal side if we start to migrate to a Bitcoin monetary economy. Okay, so this brings us back to why Lithuania and hopefully why I was invited here. I heard that Lithuania, Vilnius, wants to be a crypto finance center for the EU and potentially for the world. I think that's a great idea because it will raise the global stature with a concentration of experts. We're already seeing that with the new Rise from Barclays. Employment opportunities in finance will go up. And this will definitely happen because Bitcoin companies will want to come to a Bitcoin-friendly jurisdiction to launch their business. The government will experience an increase in GDP. And if the regulators in Lithuania are smart, they will lead this effort with a zero VAT on Bitcoin transactions and a zero rate on a capital gains tax for Bitcoin investments. This is not so unusual. I mean, Andorra already does it. Okay, if you don't believe me, then believe some people from the establishment. Bill Gates says, I think Bitcoin is a technical tour de force. Now, Al Gore, who I usually disagree with on every single thing, I happen to agree with him here. I think the fact that within the Bitcoin universe, an algorithm replaces the functions of the government is actually pretty cool. And then Nassim Taleb, he's the author of The Black Swan, a very important book I urge you to read. Bitcoin is the beginning of something great, a currency without a government, something necessary and imperative. And then I want to leave you with my quote, and you can chew on this for a while. Bitcoin is to legal tender as BitTorrents are to copyrights. And this is how you can reach me, and thank you very much for your attention today.